And that's why we have to continuously build, and you have to learn how to soften in your body and teach yourself how to create this safe space and how to love and nourish your body so that you can drop into pleasure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Shafer, your host of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, musician, life coach, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about helping others to reclaim their stories so you can build your most beautiful future. And today we have someone who has done just that on the show. I'm so excited to have Victoria Icenhower here today. Victoria is a speaker on women's health and goes by the title The Self-Love Scientist. Victoria is also a social media specialist and studio manager of The Line Method, who shares her story and empowerment through coaching, public speaking, and her inspiring podcast, Love and Lattes. Thank you so much for being on the show today with us, Victoria.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shafer. I am very excited to get this organic, beautiful conversation.
Oh, me too. I first learned about the work that you do and the beautiful way that you communicate what you are trying to help empower others to do and learn more about with regards to their self-love journey, as well as their intimate relationships and relationships in their lives, was through a women's seminar. And you were talking about just that. And I found it so inspiring, and I couldn't wait to have you on Talks with Dr. Shafer to share it with my listeners. So I'm just so excited to have you here. Let's start off with, you shared with me that your podcast has been up and running and thriving for a year now. It focuses on self-love, authenticity in relationships, and deep intimacy. Can you share with us what brought you to the position of wanting to educate and empower people about intimacy, specifically having healthy sexual relationships?
It kind of started for me like in my own personal journey and trying to understand myself like as a woman. 3 years ago, I went through a separation and divorce period. And with that, everything goes, your relationship, your identity, everything. You're like, I thought I was supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And the biggest thing in that transformation was also intimacy, because I wasn't ready or prepared to jump into another relationship. I just needed to learn how to love myself again. And I made this promise to myself. I was like, I have this new blank slate, and I need to heal and unlearn, because what I had and what I was feeling was not what I wanted. And I was like, but how did I get into this situation? And why is it very common amongst women? And so I went through my journey and I read lots of books. I did a lot of research. I'm very nerdy about what's happening between, what's happening through our minds and how it does impact intimacy. And the fact that it's not this conversation we're having in schools. And it's also not a very common conversation that we're having with even our best friends, because it requires vulnerability. And for women, we're powerhouses. We want to do all the things to make sure that we're validated, seen, and in some ways we feel loved as long as we do X, Y, and Z. And, unfortunately, that's where burnout happens. That's where resentment builds between relationships. And then we end up unhappy or unsatisfied. There's a huge statistic in women experiencing unsatisfying sex because there's a lot happening in their minds, but they feel that shame and that guilt to express what it is they really need. And so I started creating spaces and opening up and sharing people with my journey. And then I started getting a lot of real positive feedback. And that's when I learned that my vulnerability and my experiences weren't actually a weakness. They were a strength, and if not a match for something that is actually more common than we realize.
So what inspired you specifically as you were leaning into this and going on that journey yourself, and then very generously trying to share it with others as you learned along the way? What inspired you to call yourself the self-love scientist?
So the self-love scientist was born, this was right around the time I did launch my business, and I was just using my name and, I had my own original business name was Lotus Lifestyles, and the lotus is very symbolic for growth and overcoming the hard parts. And I remember, I think I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and they helped me really, you know, really get specific because I didn't want to be just a lifestyle coach. I don't talk much about money. I don't really talk much about business. But what would get me so excited is when we would talk about our relationships, including the one with yourself or even your partner, because it was such a, it was something I was like, I really wish someone would have told me this when I was young. And all of those experiences I had, and then the resources I was sharing with my clients, they all came down to self love. Like those are the building blocks. And I say building blocks very lightly because these are things we do need to revisit, even when we are in the relationships or we're married, etc. But these self love foundations were these, systems, these building blocks of my own personal experiences and research. And I thought to myself, well, the only reason I can really show up and hold space for others is because I did this myself. And my slight little pivot, but my background is in science. I have a bachelor's in forensic science and biology. And it suddenly clicked for me. I was like, oh, like, I've been looking for a title. I didn't really want to be like, another coach. I didn't want to be a lifestyle coach. I wanted to be something that people would remember. And so now that's when the self-love scientist was born, because everything we do in these spaces together is a foundation of self-love. And you get to be a scientist. And through science, you hold experiments because you can try different things and see these results. And so that's where the title was born. And it was very catchy. And people were like, I've never met one before. And I was like, bingo. There we go.
I love it. It's a great and, like you said, catchy title, and I think it's really fun. And I love it because I'm a neurologist, and for me, I talk a lot on the show when we're talking about personal development about getting data points, because so many of us have these limiting beliefs. I say it's like a backpack we're carrying around because we have all these data points from before that maybe aren't even true, but we've become quite married to them and we're carrying them with us. So it's so important when we want to reclaim our stories and change the trajectory of our life, learn new habits, empower ourselves to grow, we have to find ways to get new data points. And it is like many daily science experiments. And I love you framing it that way, because do we get upset when a science experiment goes wrong? No, we learn from that. In fact, we expect many or most of our experiments to go, quote unquote, wrong. And then we look at the data and we use that to slightly edit the way that we are approaching. Do we need to change this or that so that we can get a different outcome? That's a part of learning. That's a part of science. And I love bringing this idea to self-development and say, listen, this is just science. We expect mistakes along the way, but those are actually opportunities. Nothing that we do on this journey of self-love and development is going to be lost time or completely a mistake. It's all data.
Exactly. And it's never really going to stop. Some folks are like, oh, I did it. And I was like, the idea is that it becomes a ritual. It becomes programs. Like you said, you talked about the beliefs. We replace those. And I love the way you described the data points because, for an example, some women are carrying shame or guilt directly from, it's a young child and now they want to feel more confident in the bedroom. So we'll start talking about self-pleasure, and they'll in their minds, we have the conversation and they're like, well, that's not too hard. It's not too bad. I said, no, trust me, like try it out, schedule this date time. And a lot of them will come back and they're like, actually, I couldn't get as far as I thought. And I was like, exactly. And that's why we have to continuously build, and you have to learn how to soften in your body and teach yourself, how to create this safe space and how to love and nourish your body so that you can drop into pleasure.
I love that you have that deep conversation. You create that space as a coach. You don't necessarily have to be overly confrontational all the time, but a part of your job is to present some curious or challenging questions when the time is right. And I love how you said, this may be harder than you think it is. So just let me know how it goes. And if it's harder, by the way, that's not unexpected, because that gives that person that expectation, again, that we're going to have little hiccups along the way, and it's to be expected. It's not really a setback. I think so many of us, when it comes to our sex lives, see pretty small issues with our body or our performance or our expectations as really big issues, because our sexuality has been so intertwined with feelings of shame. How do you work with individuals and or couples to start to disentangle shame from their intimacy experiences so that they can start to connect in a different way, in a deeper way?
It's a great question. And one of the most powerful ways is to recognize that these blocks or these thoughts, memories, experiences that we're holding on to aren't actually who you are now. So it becomes a process of unlearning, which comes with a lot of, again, we've said this a lot now, but it's how do I get rid of this shame? And it's not necessarily like it's not going to be 100% removed, but let's get down to the root cause of why you're holding on to, as you said, this expectation or these narratives that, am I doing enough? Or why can't I let go? Like some women who are very happy with their partners are still hitting a wall and can't, whether they can't orgasm or can't fully drop in. And it's something that then it makes them feel self-conscious, and it's performance anxiety. And so again, it's going to be knowing and recognizing that what this program is running through right now isn't who you are now. So we have to untangle, get to the root cause, and then start to add in the programs, the thoughts, the narrative that you want and believe, which does, I try to say it like we break it down, because, I can't tell you, oh, I think you're beautiful, like you're lovely and you're safe. And I can say it until I'm blue in the face, but they have to actually anchor that in themselves and trust that, along with any other thought patterns that they might be struggling with.
So I'm hearing shame, and that's something here on Talks with Dr. Shafer. We talk a lot about shame because I think shame is one of those fundamental things that really kind of leaches in. It poisons the well water, and it affects every part of us, right? We as humans, we're 65 to 70% water, depending upon our gender. And so when you think about shame, I think it kind of fills our whole bodies and affects everything we do and think about. So I think that's a really important thing that you pointed out, and the expectations. What are some other fundamental issues that you found your clients and through your research to be things that people struggle with when they are in those intimate relationships and they are trying to take the steps to connect in a different way? But what are some stumbling blocks that you find are common, so that we can again move past shame and say, hey, these are pretty common issues we find in intimacy. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And here are some steps to work towards reframing your relationship with those feelings.
I'd say some of the other common narratives or blocks that I see in my clients in that relationship. So let's say for the woman who is seeing someone, it's going to be, tell me how great about, like, what is so great about your relationship? Oh, well, like the sex has been awesome. Okay. But they don't like the way they feel about themselves when they're with them.
Mm.
Or they'll be with someone where the intimacy isn't great, but they're with this person more or less for reasons such as security. It's, well, at least I don't have to worry about, it might be working part-time, but, this is the father of my children and they've completely fallen off. So now they're staying for the children. And, intimacy has completely dropped off the radar. I would say though, like the most common one I do get is we are, as women, we're running on this expectation that by me being intimate with another person means it's a version of like, that's how I get validation, right? Which is not true. But unfortunately, like how we grow up, what we're exposed to, it's sex has this thing where it's like, well, if you have sex with them, then you'll be fine. Like they love you. It's a way they love you. However, if they're not fulfilling you in other ways, or if the sex itself is not fulfilling, it leaves a very deep gap in the woman, and she still feels worthless or helpless or, you know, personally unsatisfied. And so I would like, I know like we've kind of gone a little back and forth, but that one I do get very, very often. It's like, well, I wish, our sex was a lot more fun or it felt good. Like sex is
Hmm.
meant to be painful, although there are smaller implications such as pelvic pain, which may be associated with another diagnosis. But when it becomes something that they're thinking about, it's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah, and I think that when you're thinking about problem solving from a health perspective, it's really important to think about, what medications are we taking? Are there side effects that are causing sexual dysfunction or a decrease in lubrication, right? Um, there are age-related changes, things related to menopause. So it's really important that we're thinking about the physiological part, how our body is functioning at that part of our life, but also the mental and physical interplay that happens there. Is there trauma in the past? Are there things that are limiting or, as you've said, blocking intimacy that need to be worked on individually so that then you can show up? Or is it something you need to work on, potentially you may benefit as a couple working on? So I think that that's really wonderful how you bring that up, because so many of us, I think, also, we didn't necessarily get a great sex ed, so to speak. We had, I hate to even say it, like the banana and the condom in PE class, done by the gym teacher, and that was sex ed, right? And that sort of training, but we didn't really have an opportunity to learn about our bodies, learn about healthy relationships, learn about why do we choose to be intimate? What happens when we're intimate? How can that affect our relationships? Things that we will experience after we become intimate for the first time in our lives as human beings. We talk about the mechanics, but we often don't really prepare young people, especially for what they're going to experience in their mind, their human experience. And I think that is really a disservice to people to not prepare them for that. And I think it does lead to kind of some expectations that are maybe taken from places like movies, or even from, I'll spell it out just because unfortunately now on the internet, there can be some strange algorithmic issues when these words are stated for, I think, really silly reasons, but pornography. So if a young person is getting their ideas about what sexuality and intimacy looks like from pornography, that can be really misleading as to what a functioning sexual relationship can look like. Have you experienced in working with people and the research you've done healthier ways to kind of go back to the basics if someone is coming to you and they're expressing their feelings and expectations about intimacy, and it's this amalgam, a construct of maybe societal, cultural inputs, but it's not necessarily reflective of what we would think in the scientific fields and relationship fields as healthy intimacy? What are some tools and maybe some resources that you could share with people to try to go back to the basics of what healthy intimacy looks like?
It's actually very interesting. You kind of said it, and it starts by asking yourself that very question. And it's one of the questions I actually do at the very beginning of our journey when intimacy is an area of concern. And it is asking yourself, well, what does intimacy mean to you? And when you ask yourself this, and again, like I've seen it in some people, they kind of giggle because they're like, haha, like it's no big deal. When in reality, when they're really thinking about it or describing it, I'm like, okay, the way you described it, like, sounds amazing and luscious, and there's candles, and you're talking about like your body, but then when you compare that to what is happening right now, it's like completely distorted. Or by asking yourself this question and you're painting this beautiful, like, let's say you're painting a picture, which is what we do most of the time, there are these feelings associated with that other reality. And then they do it where we look at this new, like, intimacy means, let's talk about, let's just say, let's compare it with a very lush faux pink rug. It's soft and it's pretty, and you love to lay on it and you can fully relax. But right now, you have imagine, those little, like, Mr. Scrubs that scrub the mat.
Oh no.
Your pan. It's hard. It is uncomfortable, but you kind of need it sometimes, and there's a little uncertainty, and you're like, am I doing this right? Am I ruining my material? You know what I mean? It's a very interesting simile, but when we really sit and ask ourselves this question and actually feel those feelings that come up, some folks will express these intimacies, but then they'll realize, they're like, oh, I know this sounds silly, but, and I'm like, no, 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 that's not, let's talk about why you feel that way. Like, why is it you think this is silly when it's what you want? And that's where we start peeling these patterns, this, oh, this happened when I was very young, or this is, for most women, we're operating on what we know.
It was so touching when you said that from the perspective of someone coming to you for help and they say, I know this sounds silly, but I think that is so telling. When we share something that we think is vulnerable, we often minimize it, in part because we're a bit afraid of what the other person's response will be to it, because for us it's actually quite big. And we say, well, you might think this is silly, because in a lot of ways, especially as women, we're not allowed to have big feelings or big emotions. And I think also a lot of us have relationships with our sexuality where we've kind of created a relationship where our bodies are somewhat tools to get to a certain end. And if we get to that certain end, then we have succeeded in pleasing our partner. And we've forgotten about connection and intimacy in that interval, and how that can truly elevate our relationship with our partner. Is that something that you experience a lot with people, this more transactional approach to sex rather than intimacy?
Transactional as in, I give them this to have this.
Yes. And transactional and a means to an end, right? I've made and it's not even necessarily transactional in the sense that I will get something. It's that if I can help my partner achieve satisfaction, I get, like you said, I get that attachment and that approval and acceptance from them. So it's not necessarily that you get something in return that's tangible. It's that you get that connection because there is a transaction going on there rather than a connection necessarily, rather than a shared experience. If you find someone is in that frame of mind, what are some excellent self-love tools that they can start to practice, maybe outside of the bedroom, maybe in a place that may feel a bit more safe or a bit less emotionally charged or frightening, as little steps to take to build that self-confidence and that feeling that they deserve to be a part of that beautiful experience and not just to be there to serve, that they actually get to be having a shared experience with their partner?
Absolutely. And I love how you said, yeah, in establishing safety is actually very vital, between couples and even yourself. And some of my favorite tools that I do share, one of the actually most impactful emotional wise is something I call, it's a body read. and it's a body read and combination with mirror talk. So I have my clients stand in front of a mirror, preferably something, if you have full length, amazing. If it's not full length, but it goes from your chest and up, it's still good. And it's, you look into the mirror and you tell yourself and you say it verbatim, I love you.
Mm.
And it's 3 simple words, and we say it to other people all the time. It's so easy for us to do that. However, when the tables turn, put it on yourself, and I would ask your audiences, when was the last time you said it to yourself?
Mm.
And that is a state of vulnerability. And some folks ask, like, why do you have me do this? I said, well, because I need you to reactivate this connection with yourself. Because again, we talked about this transactional way of sex. And another reason why women are generally in this situation is because we see sex that's, and this is sex that's not satisfying. This is just having sex to have sex, to get your partner satisfied, because to you, from that experience, you feel that you are more secure. You feel in some ways that this is validating for your position. And again, like, other women look at sex like, well, if I have sex with him, he won't leave, or he'll love me, or he's not going to leave me now. When in reality, they may not want to do it, or he may not be the person for you if that's the way you feel, but you need to create that feeling of love, validation, and worthiness in yourself, so you don't have to be in that kind of position where it feels that way. So that's a self-love tool that doesn't require you to be, in your bedroom per se, but if you do have a mirror, it's a wonderful way to start. And from my own personal experience, the first time I did it, which was many years ago, I was told this in training, and I remember laughing. I was like, this is hilarious. But when I did it, I giggled and then I cried. I cried so much, because that's when I knew that I didn't have that for myself. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it sounds so simple, but the reality, and this is nobody's fault. It's just, this is the society, this is the upbringing, the exposure we have. We're not necessarily taught, as women, especially, to build the self-worth. We even talked about the school and the education. I won't go down that road, but and so that is probably one of my favorite tools. And I think, and it's, like I said, like, it sounds so easy, but then this is something I assign clients to do, and I have them reflect, whether it's through journals or voice notes, about what came up for them. And everybody will experience something a little different.
And we're coming from the US, and you're based in Washington, DC. Am
Yeah.
I right?
Yeah.
Yes. So when we're talking about our relationship to ourself and our sexuality, I think it's really important to have some temporal awareness of when we are having this discussion and what climate, right? We are just at the end of Pride Month when we are doing this recording. It's going to come out after, but we're just on the tail end of Pride Month. We are in a political climate where there is a lot of othering going on. And that in general is difficult for building healthy relationships. And then many people feel that women's rights, there's some stripping away of women's rights. And when we see that women's health, their sexual rights, when we see that happening, that will have an effect on our sexual life, on how we are coupling, on the choices we make for things like contraception, mating in general, dating in general, marriage. It's going to have a profound effect on what that looks like. Now, I'm coupled, I'm married, and I'm gratefully out of that playing field. But I'm also a woman of reproductive age. And even if you're married, we can all be affected by what's going on in women's health right now. We could all be negatively affected depending upon where we are in our lives. Have you sensed in your work with people with this climate an elevated sense of sensitivity or chargedness when discussing sexuality, intimacy, and relationships with these new issues that I think a lot of us had felt that we crossed, we covered these hurdles, we passed this, we're in this time of really women being liberated and empowered to make their choices about their bodies. And now that we feel, for many of us, that there's been some setbacks in women's health and autonomy, bodily autonomy, how do you see that affecting your clients, the people that you care for, and what advice or support do you provide them when they're facing that?
So in this current climate that we are in that you highlighted, I would say right now, I think the only thing that's really affecting my clients right now, let's say from a women's perspective, I do have male clients as well, but they're more so focused on job and security, and that's a whole nother conversation. But for women in this climate, there is a fear of, there's like, they feel like they're on a clock, right? I'm supposed to have kids at this age. I'm supposed to, how am I going to find love now that things are just so, there's like, it's like the world has its own 50 tabs open and no one knows where this information is coming from. So they're overwhelmed and they're fearful that, what if, when will it be my turn? And how will I get this? Is this even available for me? And it's teaching them that it is, and you do get to have this or what you're looking for, but it's going to, it does come down to a balance, right? Like, I'm going to use the DC woman, right? There's a lot of like, if I just came back from a lunch with some friends and you look around and these women most of them are in shape. They work very hard, but it's black and white, it's one side or the other. And the conversations I have with, my clients themselves, like they're hardworking women, but when they date or they're trying to find their person, it's just that, there's an alpha mentality to this. Oh, I can't let him do that. And I'm like, why? Or, there's a thing that's very common in DC where if a man were to open the door for you, women are like, don't do that. Like, I don't need your help. And it's like, let him help you. And so there's a fear, from what I'm hearing is I don't want them to take too much control, or what if they do get control. Like you said, not just the side of opening up, like opening the car door is a small example, but again, it can get bigger. Like, well, how do you let him take control like your partner, in the bedroom? Is this the right time to bring him to your place? How much time do you need? And helping them slowly dismiss, like maybe when it comes to, the reproductive part, is this something you want? Because now we live in a time where when I was much younger, it was like a checklist. You had to do all these things. And then by this middle, like let's say in your mid to late 20s, you should be having children. That's not the case anymore. Most women don't want to have children. Most women don't want to get married because they don't want to, they don't want to be in control, and that is their choice. But they have to navigate that feeling. They have to navigate, for myself, I'm in my 30s and my parents were expecting grandchildren at this point. I'm like, no, but they know that I am the happiest and healthiest I've ever been, compared to where I was 3 years ago. And so it is in this climate right now, it's how much is going to be available and how can I let not just anyone in, but how do I learn what that looks like? It's easy
Hmm.
to, like, let's say someone compliments you or flirts with you at the cafe and you're like, oh, thank you. It's nice. But then they'll ask for your number probably. And while you may want to give it to them, deep down you already uncovered the person you're looking for. Is this the person that you have visualized, or is just another test? So you have to, like, my one of my really good friends told me once, she goes, you tell me what you want, but your actions really need to speak for themselves. And it's just so easy
Hmm.
to get caught up in flirtation. It's so easy to just want to be seen and flirted with. And you know again, I teach them, like, you got to learn how to flirt back, but then also be okay with walking away with that confidence, like, that was nice, and now I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, and that's where the self-love comes in, because if you are looking for acknowledgement from someone else, you might go into a pretty shallow pool to get it because it's there. It's shallow, but it's there. Whereas when you are full of self-love, you're not going to pour yourself into a shallow pool. You've done a lot of work to get to this place of personal fulfillment, and you want to spend your time and energy with someone who's on that same path with you. So yes, I think it's so important to get to that place where you are making decisions and your actions are really speaking for what it is that you're wanting in your life. Now, going back to the comments that you made about your life and how it's changed in recent years with your separation and divorce, I read a quote of yours in Canvas Rebel where you said, quote, "One of the biggest risks I've ever taken was filing for divorce while running my own business. Not only was my health on the line, the fear of rejection of my family, being alone in finances, my entire identity was on the line as well." That was such a moving quote for me, as someone who has also gone through a very painful separation and divorce and have coached women through the same experience. We talk a lot about reclaiming your story here on Talks with Dr. Shafer. When you look back at that quote and think about the shame and the expectations you had on yourself that you had to shed, and now you look at the perspective of who you were 4 or 5 years ago, who you are now, what are the 3 things, let's say, that you had to really act out and be consistent with in your daily routine, right? Walk the walk, as you said. Have the behavior that's going to get you living the life that you're really having an aligned experience with who you are and what your purpose is. What are 3 things that you had to embody on a regular basis to get to where you are today so that you can help others on their journey?
That's a great question. And I do like a little reminiscing here and there. And if there were 3 things I would say to that version of myself, I think the one that's really coming up for me is you have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Like, yes, it's absolutely going to be hard. And at the same time, isn't it just so exciting? And
Hmm.
I remember feeling that way, that fear. And it was that pivot. It was like, if I stay in this relationship, I don't know what I'm scared of the repercussions of that. But if I look to the right, even though I don't exactly have a roadmap with me, I have faith here that this is going to work. And I know in my gut and my heart that it's right for me and it's what I must do. And that requires me to jump. Like, you're going to have to jump and there's going to be a net to catch you. But in order to get what you want, you have to jump, you have to get uncomfortable with this. And then eventually you're going to look back and go, "Oh my god, that wasn't so hard." When I find myself in uncomfortable situations, I'm like, "Wait a minute, I had to go through divorce. That was the hardest thing. This is nothing." And
Hmm.
the second part is, And I do this actually to this day. Sometimes I forget, but then there'll be a moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I show up for myself today? And when I say show up, I'm not talking about just like whether I get on in social media. How did I show up for myself? Did I ask what I need of myself today? Maybe it's, having a little bit of coffee. Maybe I need to stretch on my yoga mat, or just when I wash my face, am I taking my time with myself? And that's, integrating self love. Or the past year now, I've been kind of in this more, my whole output is now romance. So I'm looking for ways to romance myself. So I,
Hmm.
feel like, oh, I have what I need, because it creates like a nurturing, loving relationship with myself. Um, and then the third thing, I think, when it comes to taking that risk those 3 years ago, I think it sounds really short, but I would have to say just knowing and trusting like you're going to be okay. In that moment, there was a lot of shame of what will my friends think? What will my family think? Being that this is, I just remember feeling like, what are they going to think? Because on the outside, it looked like this, staple Instagram relationship. And the people who are meant to be in your life will either be there for a long period of time or a short period of time, but they will be there for you because they love you, and you have to trust that. And if they're not meant for you, like in any case, divorce, separation, breakups, people are coming and going, but there's a version of you that you're stepping into that they're going to hold on to this old version of you, and that's on them. It's not for you to carry anymore.
Yeah. I always say you have to go where you can grow. If you can't grow where you are, you have to go where you can grow. And that's the beautiful thing about the body and the nervous system is it sends you signals that things aren't working. It gives you that, you talked about trusting your gut, trusting that instinct that you had to move, basically move or perish, right? If you stayed there, something really bad was going to happen. A part of you was going to die, or maybe physical ailments were going to be born out of nervous system dysregulation because things weren't okay in your relationship. I think we really underestimate, a lot of us do, because of cultural expectations, maybe things that happened in our family, that happened honestly because the circumstances were just very different for maybe the pillar of our family, our grandmother, right? She couldn't leave, right? She couldn't have a car. She couldn't have a job, right? So there were reasons behind the quote unquote stability of relationships that we weren't privy to. All we saw as kids is these are really long lasting, stable relationships. And then we head into our relationships and maybe something's not working. It's destroying our health. It's destroying our peace, but we have this feeling of shame, or maybe even family is projecting that, their expectations, their fears on us. And so we try to stay. But the brain and the body will tell you this isn't working. And I love to use the example of what we call syncope in medicine, or fainting. Your brain is a very greedy organ. It wants 20, 25% of your blood flow at any given moment, no matter what's going on. It's your greediest organ. And so if it is deprived of that because you're dehydrated, you're stressed, you have an issue with your heart, etc., whatever be the case, and it's not getting the blood flow at once, it's going to send you a few signs, usually things like, if you have enough time, you may have some tunnel vision, changes in your breathing, changes in your heart rate. You might feel hot, sweaty. Those are all signs that your brain is telling you, get down. But the important part is it's get down or I will put you down. Because at the end of the day, I need the most from you. I'm your brain. I'm in charge. I'm your supercomputer. And if I don't get what I want, it's lights out. And we really need to, when we talk about self-love and the science, we really need to understand if we don't have self-love and we're just pouring ourselves into all these external things and doing nothing to build up ourselves and take care of ourselves, it's going to be a system malfunction followed by a shutdown. Because at the end of the day, maybe society and culture and family has told us we need to do these things for everyone else. At the end of the day, our body will show us signs that that doesn't work because we were designed to have our own needs met. We have to, as animals, as organisms, as human beings. And so our body will send us all these signals, often through our nervous system in a variety of ways, that tell us we have to change our focus and we have to start looking inward and start meeting our own needs. And that's in our relationships with our family. And it's also very importantly in our intimate relationships, which are often some of the closest relationships that we have.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think reassuring and like thinking about what you just said, listening, and not just listening to anyone, because we're already good at that. I know everyone listening to this podcast, you're a great listener, but now it's time for you to listen. And there are tools that I've done in my own private clients and that's how to read and listen. Like, what is your body telling you? Where do you feel this right now? And most of the time it's, in the gut. Or you mentioned some really great side effects when it comes to like, am I in the right situation? There are other ones too, especially when it comes to intimacy. For some women, I have to say there might be a situation where your partner's reflecting on how great it feels, but to you, your body is tightening because deep down, physically, you don't feel safe with this person. So when you feel unsafe or you don't trust them, and I could go off on like, there's so many reasons behind this, but the biggest thing is, your body is telling you something and you have to listen. Otherwise, you're just pushing down further and further. You're furthering and deepening what will later become a trauma, which will manifest itself into another complication with the body.
Right. And also, we don't understand it when we're forming what we call in these, sometimes we call them toxic relationships or these coercive controlling relationships, which I think is the most accurate scientific way to describe it. Some people say narcissistic relationships. We're forming trauma bonds to people when we have these intimate relationships with them, because intimacy is intimate, right? We are sharing our body. We are sharing our intimate moments with them. And if we are focused on trying to transactionally gain favor or connection with someone through that act, we can be kind of skipping some steps and trying to get to a place of connection with this person that maybe they haven't earned with us. And now neurochemically, we've formed bonds with them that can be difficult to break, and they take getting really intentional and getting really clear-headed, which can be really hard to do when you have that neurochemical cocktail going on, because physical intimacy is involved. And so I think it's really important. I appreciate you bringing up the safety piece, because you can have those feelings of butterflies and think, oh, this is passion and things like that. But if you're getting those signals from your body, your gut, your nervous system that you're not safe, it is so important to, in a moment that is level, that you're not in that neurochemical cocktail, to really sit with that and think about that and try to make decisions that do keep you safe and that really honor your autonomy and meeting your needs as an individual, rather than continuing to pour out into everybody else. Yeah. And I love talking about the body and listening to the body and incorporating that. I think it's so intriguing that you work with the Line Method Pilates studio. Do you incorporate Pilates into the work you do, or any other exercise and movement to help people who maybe feel disconnected from their bodies, right? Maybe they're up in their heads about their intimacy, but they're not connected with their bodies. Is there a way to use physical activity, things like Pilates, to help reconnect someone with their body?
Definitely. And I think what was interesting is when I started working at the Line Method, they have another approach to physical movement. And it's more than just, let's say you go on a run and you're just running. You run for the miles, you run for the heat, or when you're lifting weights, you push and you push. But when it comes to this reconnection with your body, and it's all about reconnecting your brain, like we talked about, your brain is the biggest organ in the body. Um, it's becoming present, right? Like, let's talk about going on a walk. I love doing those things. I did one yesterday, but when I went on my walk yesterday, I start feeling, are your feet on the ground? Do you feel the ground beneath your feet? And, what is your intention for this walk? Like, what is it that you need right now? And for me, it's a playful thing. I get to go outside and the sun is out. I let the sun warm my skin. So emotionally, I'm starting to regulate my nervous system while still moving. And I have to, catch myself sometimes where I'm like, no, this feels really good. But it's interesting with it being, in DC, it's like really hot right now. And in some cases, women would continuously push themselves. Like, I have to keep going. I have to get 10,000 steps in, but it's also hot. You have clear signs of dehydration. You need to turn around. Your body is saying, turn around, but you feel like you have to exert yourself. So it's really important to notice where you are in your body and, the intentions behind your movement. And the Pilates piece is more so, what is it that you want, that you're looking to do? And is it what you want to do, or are you going after something that someone expects of you? So it's definitely asking yourself the questions. And breathing. Oh my God. If you really think about it, we could go all day. It's happening on its own, right? Like, your heart's beating, there's blood flow. However, if you really want to drop in and calm the nervous system, if you take a second, if you're listening to the podcast and you're sitting, again, start from the ground up, feel your feet, and then take 3 deep breaths, each with like about 3 to 6 seconds with the inhale, and then 3 to 6 seconds with the exhale. It's a more intentional approach, while also recognizing that you are here in the now. You're not yesterday, and there's no reason for you to be in the future right now. I need you here now. Body and brain need you here now as well.
Those are such great tips. And something, Victoria, I'd be interested in your response to this too, when it comes to intimacy and relationships. For me, something that I've always respected and that really brought me into the moment, because I'm someone, I do a lot of things. So I'm always, this. And it's really easy to get very fixated on the future and forget your present. Something that I've always respected about people that reminds me of slowing down your breathing is people who slow down their rate of speech and are really focused on their messaging and their delivery make such a great impact. And it's because they are really forcing you to pay attention. When you slow down the rate of your speaking, right? And you maybe bring down your volume a little bit, you bring, the tenor of your voice changes, it pulls in our attention. And it makes me think about being intentional about breathing, right? We breathe automatically, we speak automatically. But when we take the time to slow it down and really focus, we have a different experience. And it's the same with exercise. Not all exercise is about the reps or how fast or how far we went, right? Some of the muscle building we do is based on being, having a very long phase rather than short repetitions, getting all those reps in. And so, but many of us haven't experienced that. We haven't been educated on that. And we've been in this kind of hustle culture, and doctors are very guilty of this. We hustled to get into medical school. We hustled to get through. We hustled to get through residency. And then, we are in this system where we're getting the RVUs, seeing as many patients as possible. It's just hustle, hustle, hustle. And then you add on family and kids, and it's just a rat race. But the magic happens, and the breakthroughs in our self-development and in our health happen when we slow down and we get really present in the moment. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And it also really makes me think about those moments of intimacy where we slow down, we quiet the thoughts in our head. We're not thinking about the end result or the things we have to do, or maybe our limiting beliefs about our body, our expectations of ourselves, things like shame. And we're just focused on, what am I experiencing right now? And what could I do to improve this experience for myself? How could I support myself in this moment to be really present? And then how could I talk to my partner afterwards about what that experience was like? How was it different? How could we do something different in the future that connects us and really helps us move towards creating that relationship that's really fulfilling and is really bringing us closer together as a couple, and really bringing us closer to loving ourselves and saying, I am worth having pleasure. I am worth being a whole person and not shaming this very normal part of my human needs.
Absolutely. And I do like the way you expressed exactly how we're talking, because I spoke a couple years ago, and it's one of my favorite things to do. But the reason why I was able to meet women and meet more clients was when I was speaking to them, I wasn't speaking at a different kind of level. I was like, no, I'm here right in front of your face, but I'm speaking to you as I'm speaking to my younger version of self, and I'm trying to create that safe space that she never had and these women don't have. And this is where they start to create that relatability, and like, oh, everything she's saying to me, I either need to hear, or there's that version of, I think a lot of women that I tend to attract more are ones who are going through a separation period or a breakup, or they're just looking to bring that confidence back out. But in the bedroom, when it comes to intimacy, I think you made a really good point. When it comes to not just like, when you're soft with your person, I'm not saying like speaking softly and super sexy. It's more like, because that's easy. It's a different thing. But when we kind of talked about it earlier, but the reason why being slow with yourself in the bedroom is important, because your brain, I promise you, people listening know exactly what I'm talking about. You're excited to have sex. You want to have sex. You want the orgasm, but then suddenly it's grocery list and I got a call in another hour. Can they hear us? And then it's, oh, I didn't exercise and my belly is a little more, is bigger or something like that. All thoughts that we all have, like we all share very similar thoughts. But when we really slow it down and we're just, with our partner, and it could start by just little bit of hand holding and touching. And then when you're kissing and the kissing turns into making out and you're really thinking about it, like you are creating and just craving and nourishing and loving this space, because you're now in the state of intimacy of making love. And then you have this, it's limitless. There's so much that could come from that. It could get faster. It could turn into, what is your pleasure and experiences. But you did say a good point. It's going into it, don't put all these expectations on how you're supposed to perform. And, unfortunately, like for women, we're built for pleasure. That's why we got all those nerves down there. But it's so easy for us to lose sight of intimacy and pleasure, because like, I don't have sex enough, or every time I have sex, it hurts. And it's, again, it's that intentionality and being soft and creating safety and softness with your person, or even when it comes to your own practice, like slow it down, let's drop in, and you get to make it as you like. It doesn't have to meet anybody else right now.
That's beautiful. And it's so important that we really learn to approach our sexuality without shame, our pleasure without shame, and frankly, just taking back our time and our experience of our lives. And our sexuality is a part of that. And so it's so important that we give ourselves the time to breathe and be in this moment. We can think about the grocery list later. We can think about, walking the dog later. Give yourself this moment. And if things don't feel safe, if they don't feel good, if you're having a medical issue that's causing dryness and pain, be present for that and think, okay, I need to address this because I deserve safety in my partnership, or I deserve to have sexual health, that maybe this is a sign of a medical issue that needs to be dealt with. So don't just get lost in shame and blame and push these things aside. Sit with it and then do things that will help improve your experience, because you really, really deserve it. You deserve to have that connection with yourself. And then, if you so choose, that connection with others in a safe and meaningful way. So I so appreciate you talking, Victoria, to us today. Are there any parting thoughts you have to help promote healthy intimacy and connection in relationships and self-love as the self-love scientist?
Well, you did kind of say something in this, something that, I would have liked to have known or had with me even all those years ago, but I do have it now. Um, and that's communicating. Even if there's a part of you that's like, I'm a little nervous to ask, I'm a little nervous to say it, you say it, whether it's, if you're not in the mood, you're not in the mood, and that's okay. Your partner is not a mind reader. They don't know, like they're not going to know. They're just going to see, they're going to be on their own, they're on their own journey.
Yeah.
But I would say communication can actually go so far, and it's not just these superficial conversations of, well, let's schedule sex. It's more so in those intimate moments, like you said, and just noticing, if it is, things happen in our bodies where you might need more lubrication, or things are working, but then you're like, I really want to change positions. Knowing how to speak up for yourself is going to actually create more confidence, because that's, this is how you love yourself. You're like, what, I'm having a really great time, and I would also love it if you did X, Y, and Z. Or saying, what, I thought I was in it, and I'm not feeling well, or I just have so much on my mind. And it could turn into a beautiful conversation. And I think it is important for anyone to know that your person, if you're with someone, this is all about when you're with somebody, it is, telling them like what's coming up for you right now. Because if you do create this distance in the most intimate, as you said, you're creating a bond. But if you distance yourself from this moment, it's going to, over time, if this is a routine for you, it's not nobody's winning. Nobody wins when we're distant in such a very close connection. And I think with self-love, I think one of the things I have to share in my own personal journey, I learned how to, really nourish myself, because I had a lot of, was very self-conscious. I was very carrying a lot of shame around my sexuality. So I started learning how to pleasure myself. And then even though when I would date and have intimacy with other people, I could tell when I was like, oh, I'm actually not into this, and if I didn't say something versus when I did, it was completely different. And just knowing and having this information with you, and knowing this feels good, or I do need lubrication, or depending on where you are, if you do still experience cycles, what you can try. It's important for you to know that, because unfortunately, this is not a conversation, and it's not in the school books. So if you don't love your body, how can putting that expectation on someone else is not fair, and it can come with its own set of consequences. So I always and will be a huge advocate for self-loving yourself and creating that intimate relationship with others.
That's beautiful and so important. And at the end of the day, if it's a deal breaker for you to draw a boundary with someone,
Yes.
that should be a deal breaker for you, that that's not a safe place for you to experience intimacy. And so instead of seeing, I think we often need to reframe that, especially as women in intimacy. If we say no, and that leads to a big consequence in a relationship, that isn't an indicator of how we're showing up in the relationship. That's an indicator of how that person is showing up in the relationship. And we need to think long and hard about, if I'm not allowed to say no, what does that mean for our relationship? And is that something I'm okay with? And do I need to be making different decisions in my intimate relationship or in relationships in the future? So if you're afraid to say no, that in and of itself is a place to start doing that vulnerable deep dive into where that's coming from, and even working with someone like a therapist or a coach to try to understand that better, because that's really, really important. And we all deserve safety. We all deserve healthy intimacy, and we deserve to love ourselves. Victoria, how can our audience connect with you, reach out to you, and follow the podcast?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. Anyone listening, you can go to my website. It's theselflovescientist.com. Again, very catchy, very simple, hard to forget. But on my website, I do offer an opportunity that you can schedule. It's a free virtual chat with myself, and we can discuss any blocks you might be having and if we're a good fit to do some work together, or if you just want to pop on and say hi. And the podcast is the Love and Lattes podcast. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And I don't have a website exactly for that, but you can find it on the selflovescientist.com. And if you want to follow my journey, I am on Instagram at Victoria_Icenhower. I've kind of pulled back a lot more on the social side. So now I'm just spending most of my social media. It's got hints of self-love, a lot of romance is there for sure, but it's more so for the podcast and also my own personal journey, because again, this is something we get to enjoy and redo over and over and over. This is not, just because you complete the course doesn't mean we're 100% healed, but you will feel 100% lighter and more connected. My whole thing is reclaiming your power so you can redefine the relationships you have, including the one with yourself.
That's wonderful. Well, Victoria, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, go visit Victoria Icenhower online on her website, on Instagram. Follow along, enjoy the podcast. We're so grateful, Victoria, that you are here today. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all these amazing tips and your story with us.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shafer. It was a very lovely conversation, and I love the mission you're doing. And I think it's important to have these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I agree. These are such important conversations to have, and start turning the conversation on its head and getting rid of shame altogether so we can just talk about healthy sexual lives, which we all deserve. Thank you so much to our listeners for being here. Storytellers, we couldn't do this without you. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you subscribe to the show so you don't miss the exciting and inspiring upcoming guest episodes we have for you here on Talks with Dr. Shafer. As always, until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.